Hey guys, what's going on? Megan here. The video's finally out. Why chasing the pump builds muscle faster than chasing strength. And I'm going to back up every single point with nothing but facts. Screw your feelings. Studies are going to be in the description. Every single thing I'm going to mention in this video is going to be prove the FN. So no opinions here, straight facts, all right? Bodybuilder of the day is Jay Cutler, one of my favorite Mr. Olympians of all time. He had some massive, massive shoulders. I remember back in 2009, I dreamt of having shoulders like that. Obviously, we're not going to hit that as natties, but they serve as great motivation. All right, first, let's knock out some myths. All right, let's start with some myth busting. Number one, volume is the number one driver of hypertrophy, period. If you haven't watched my video on progressive overload and stronger is not bigger, I suggest you check those out. But I'm not going to go into detail to keep the video shorter. Volume is the driver of hypertrophy, not mechanical tension. Right? In fact, it's the volume of mechanical tension that decides your hypertrophy. Your load is irrelevant. So how much weight on the ball is irrelevant if you train hard enough. Meaning if you train as close to failure as possible, you don't have to go to complete balls deep failure. But as long as you train heavy enough and close enough to failure, it doesn't matter what rep range you're using. I've been talking about this for years, but now there are so many studies to back it up. You can look them up yourself. You know, when I made the video about that back in, I think 2012, 2013, I didn't have any studies. I didn't need any studies. It's common sense. Number two, progressive overload is the result of hypertrophy. You got to understand that, guys. People think that I'm against progressive overload. That's nonsense, right? I'm against how it's misapplied, right? There's too much shitty advice on the internet telling people that they have to go hit PLs every day in order to build muscle, or they have to be super fucking strong in order to build muscle, which is BS, right? Progressive overload is a result of hypertrophy. As you get bigger, you get stronger. It's not the other way around, right? So stronger is not bigger, bigger is stronger, period. Right? The bigger guys are strong because they are big. You know, if you need further proof of that, think about powerlifting. It's the reason why you have weight classes in powerlifting. It's because the bigger you are, you automatically have an advantage over the rest of the competition. It's not a coincidence. Next, progressive overload is the result of training experience. The longer you've been training, and when I say progressive overload here, I'm referring to strength because that's usually what most people, attribute it to. So the longer you've been training, the stronger you are. Again, period. That's a fact, right? So the reason why somebody who's benching 400 has a bigger chest, right? Simply because he's been training for goddamn long, right? So I hate that horrible comparison people make on my comment section all the time. They say, well, Megan, the person who has a 300-pound bench is going to have a bigger chest than the one who has a 90-pound bench. No shit, motherfucker. The guy with a 300-pound bench has been training for goddamn years, right? So you got to understand, your strength is mostly based on neural adaptations, leverages and things like that. But progressive overload is the result of training experience. The longer you train, eventually you're going to have to increase the weight, all right? That's why I tell people, if I say pick a weight and do 20 reps, eventually you're going to have to increase that weight because after a while, your body's going to adapt to the 20 reps. And now when you reach 20, you're not going to get a pump and you're going to realize you have like 10 more reps left in the tank. So instead of endlessly increasing the reps, you can simply increase the weight to make the workout more challenging. But notice how you progressively overloading because you adapted, right? So the adaptation process comes first. Then you increase the weight, right? So don't go to the gym thinking, oh my God, I have to lift more weight than last time. I'm not going to grow. That's freaking nonsense. The fifth thing is you got to understand, guys, recruiting and fatiguing your fast twitch muscles is all that matters. When you're trying to build muscle, right, you already know you have slow twitch muscles, fast twitch muscles. You have low threshold units. You have high threshold units, right? You want to target those high threshold motor units, right? They're the ones that control the fibers that are the most responsive to growth, the ones that are going to grow the most. How do you do that? You could lift heavy, right? If you lift heavy, obviously your body has to recruit the high threshold motor units, or you could do high repetitions to failure. Again, when I say to failure, it means, you don't have to kill yourself, but like leaving at least 1 or 2 reps in the tank. All right, now that we understand that, let's get straight to the video. The top 3 forms of pump training, right? So number 1, you have KAATSU, obviously, right? Blood flow restriction training, occlusion training. It goes by many different names, but you gotta understand where it came from. It originated in the 1960s by this guy here, Yoshiaki Sato. He's the legend that pretty much destroyed all the myths on heavy lifting and all that bullshit, right? Back in the 60s. And sure enough, of course, the scientific community didn't want to listen to him at first. And now there are over 600 studies backing up blood flow restriction training. It's changing the world. Every continent you go to, every expert will tell you, it is literally game changing. And it's nothing new. It's just that people don't want to talk about it because it crushes their ego. But anyway, so he created it back in the 1960s. But you don't have to put stuff on your arms to get the same effect, right? That's why I call it pump training, because you can really get the same effect through drop sets, rest balls. Those are my top 3 ways to maximize the pump. You could do drop sets, you could do rest balls, or you could just do KAATSU, right? BFR. How did I discover this? Is when I was doing my research on Nucleus overload, when I was trying to understand why is it that high rep works so well, because back then, like I said, at the time, it was all about, oh, you gotta lift heavy, you gotta lift heavy, you gotta get stupid strong, right? Bullshit, right? And I was like, wait, that goes against Nucleus because people are making insane gains doing high rep push-ups, high rep pull-ups, you know, why? What's happening? And eventually that's when I stumbled upon this, and boom, I was mind blown. All right, so let's go into the reasons. Number one, fastest recorded growth ever. The fastest recorded growth on humans, right, is with blood flow restriction training. That's not a coincidence, right? And here are some numbers here. You can see results as early as 2 weeks, depending on the training status. Whereas when you're using typical heavy lifting, it normally takes about 8 to 12 weeks to see significant results. One example here is you got 37% growth in 16 weeks. That is like one of the best growth that we've seen with traditional heavy lifting. And those were high responders that had some of the best genetics. Whereas in Katsu, we saw 40% growth in only 2.5 weeks, right? And it wasn't swelling because the researchers are not stupid. They actually waited until the swelling went down so they can, focus only on muscle growth. And that's obviously insane. Now, of course, if you train, you're not going to get 40% in 3 weeks, but you're still going to get more than if you're doing traditional heavy lifting. And the reason is simple. You're getting the same protein synthesis as heavy lifting, right? But you're getting less muscle damage, a lot less muscle damage, which means you could recover faster, meaning you could train more frequently, right? Remember, like the training frequency is mainly dictated by how fast you recover from muscle damage. So less damage, faster recovery, more frequency means more volume. And of course, volume is the number one driver of hypertrophy. So the more volume you could do at the end of the week, theoretically, the higher your growth response. Next, the pump is the second biggest predictor of muscle growth. The first biggest predictor is obviously testosterone, right? Your androgen receptor density. The more androgen receptors you have, that's the number one predictor of how much muscle you could put on any program. So the pump is actually, based on correlations, the second biggest predictor, meaning at the end of your workout, right? They looked at the pump at different stages, 10 minutes after, 5 minutes after, 30 minutes after the workout, whatever. And the swelling, the pump that you have 10 minutes after your workout accounts for 36% of the hypertrophy you're going to put on at the end of your workout program, right? Whether it's 8 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, which is ridiculous, guys. That is much higher than the correlation between strength and size. And it's like I'm telling you guys, strength and size are not fucking equal. In fact, strength is not even one of the top 5 predictors of muscle growth. Bet you didn't know that, right? Because you keep listening to shitty advice. So muscle swelling post-workout has a bigger effect on how much muscle you're going to put on than all these other factors that you guys thought was important. And again, I made videos in the past about how at the time it was broad science because I didn't have studies behind it. How the muscles that grew the fastest on me, or the people that I trained or work with, were the ones that we had the most insane pumps on. We would like literally pick up a weight and then the muscle would just blow up, especially the muscles that we did nucleus overload on. It was very, very easy to get a pump on those, and they will also grow extremely fast. Contrary to that, the muscles that we all had issues growing, and that's everyone that I work with, including myself, were the ones that we could not get good pumps in for whatever reason. But at the time when I made the video, of course, I didn't have studies. So I was like, hey, guys, it's just bro science. But this is what I noticed. And I'm not the only one. And a lot of people have noticed that as well. A lot of the muscles that we can't grow, we just simply can't get it pumping. And that could be due to activation and things like that. But, studies are not backing it up. And this study is extremely new. And I can't wait for more follow-up studies on that. Next, you get extremely low muscle damage doing BFR or, pretty much pump training. And again, like I said, little to no damage means faster protein synthesis, lower protein breakdown, right? So meaning it's faster for you to go back to break even. Because remember, if you have too much damage, guys, that's what people forget. Damage is fine, but excessive damage is bad. Why? Because your body first has to waste its resources to repair the damage, bringing you back to break even. Then it starts to build muscle, right? And again, studies are backing that up, guys. So if you do too much muscle damage, your body's going to waste the first few days that are supposed to be spent on protein synthesis. Your body's going to spend that time just recovering damage. So really, you're just going back to break even before the growth actually begins. So you don't want excessive muscle damage. And that's one of the reasons why BFR, Katsu, built so much muscle in such a short amount of time, because you're getting all the protein synthesis, but the protein breakdown is so much lower. And also because you have less muscle damage, guys, you gotta remember, too much muscle damage makes it harder for you to recruit high threshold motor units, those high threshold fibers that grow the most. So if you have too much damage, it's going to be very hard to recruit them. But with Katsu, because you have low muscle damage, it's actually easy to recruit those, which is why you could train more frequently. And again, that's going to lead to more weekly volume, which is the number one driver of hypertrophy. Next, extremely fast recovery. Goes back to the previous slides. Faster recovery, you could train multiple times a day, meaning you're getting more pulses in those anabolic factors, IGF-1, growth hormone, lactate, all the things that stimulate growth. You gotta understand they have a very short half-life. So the more frequently you train, better. That's why Nucleus overload works so well. It's mainly because of the frequency, which adds up to a lot of weekly volume. Next, obviously, lowers myostatin, right? You guys know this was coming. Myostatin, the #1 muscle killer. If you don't know what myostatin is, if you've been living under a rock, watch my video on it. But pretty much you gotta understand it returns to baseline really fast after training, right? So when you train, you lower myostatin, which allows your muscles to grow. It allows your satellite cells to proliferate and multiply. But it goes back up within 24 hours. With KAAT2 or pump training, because you're training so frequently and you can train multiple times a day, you're able to keep myostatin at low levels, which is also how steroids work. People don't know this. Steroids lower myostatin. Testosterone lowers myostatin. So these people are constantly have low levels of myostatin. Next, extremely time efficient, right? It takes less than 5 minutes per muscle, or exercise to do pump training or be it blood flow restriction or whatever. Even drop sets. And I made a video about the drop set study, right? All the drop set studies have shown that you're putting on the same amount of muscle as someone who's lifting heavy, but you're doing that in 70% less time. 70% less time. That means a 1-hour workout is reduced to 17 minutes, guys. That's insane. Extremely time efficient for people who have lives and jobs and things like that. And like I said, it allows you to come back to the gym in the evening and work out again, right? So you're getting the same growth with 70% less time. And it's also a form of cardio because, again, you're getting so much work done in a short amount of time. Next, it increases fast twitch muscle activation. Like I mentioned earlier, you got to recruit those fast twitch fibers, and, you guys know the famous comparisons between marathon runners and sprinters. What is the difference? Why is it that marathon runners look like shit and sprinters all jacked? Right? It's all about the muscle fibers. Sprinters are obviously using fast twitch, high threshold motor units. Marathon runners are not, right? And when you're doing blood flow restriction training, you're increasing fast twitch activation, even though the weight is not heavy. Remember, these guys are using extremely light weights. Now, I don't recommend you use weights that light. People have this misconception that when I say light weights, I'm referring to fucking 100 rep sets. No, when I say light, I mean 15 to 20 reps, maybe 20 to 30, but no more than that, right? You can go higher, but it's not time efficient. So high threshold motor units are the most capable of growth, and you get to recruit them with KAAT2, which is the reason why, again, it gives you the same gains as someone lifting heavy. It's all about the fiber recruitment. Next, it maximizes satellite cell activity up to 3 times more. So believe it or not, and I've been talking about this for so long, people think that you have to have muscle damage to activate satellite cells or to have them fuse and cause hyperplasia. Bullshit. There are so many fucking studies on this, guys. So many showing you that no, you do not need to excessively damage a muscle to have satellite cell activation. You can do that with hormones, IGF-1, mechanical growth factor, all of which are released with high rep training. Inflammation is going to cause that. Adrenaline. Obviously, you get a lot of adrenaline when you're doing drop sets and, blood flow restriction. Lactic acid, of course, reactive oxygen speed. Pretty much all the metabolic stress factors increase satellite cell activation, even with minimal muscle damage. Because remember, KAAT2 is the only training method that has the lowest amount of muscle damage out of every single training technique out there. Next, walking. This is amazing. KAAT2 is the only training system where people are actually putting on muscle, obviously not a ton, but actually putting on muscle from just walking, right? And you can look that up, guys. They're literally putting fucking the bands around the thighs and walking for about 20 minutes, and you see muscle growth, which does not happen under normal conditions. Next, bed rest. Again, KAAT2 has been tested on patients, and that's why it's such a popular technique, because it works even on old people. And like I said, guys, if you want to find something that works, don't look for what works on untrained people or people with good. No, look for what works on old people, because old people are the hardest people to put muscle on. So if something works on trained men or old people, it's gonna work on the average person, because those motherfuckers are almost impossible to see hypertrophy on. Yet KAAT2 shows extreme increases in muscle growth in populations that we previously thought could not build muscle, with half, sometimes 60, 80% less weight. And again, they've done experiments where with people that have casts on their legs due to surgery or they're bedridden, coma, whatever, where when you apply KAAT2, they actually lose less muscle. If you're not aware, when your leg is immobilized, you actually lose a ton of muscle because it's obviously not moving. It's almost like astronauts in space. They come back and, they look like Smeagol. They lost all their muscle gains because there's no gravity, there's no tension on the muscles. But for some reason, even if you're laying in bed, and you apply blood flow restriction, the muscle loses less myofibers. Next, pump training increases IGF-1. You guys knew that was coming. Again, IGF-1 has a very, very short half-life. So the more frequent the workouts, the better the increases in that critical peptide. Again, it's master regulator of satellite cells, critical for hyperplasia, critical for strength gains, protein synthesis, mTOR, protein breakdown. Obviously, it lowers myostatin, and it also increases the activity of the androgen receptor. Not to mention glycogen and bone density and things like that. Next, it maximizes growth hormone, right? Again, growth hormone is needed for IGF-1, so you can pretty much copy and paste all the effects of IGF-1, and you're gonna see that with growth hormone. And believe it or not, there's a lot of rumors that growth hormone is not anabolic. That is wrong. Growth hormone is extremely anabolic, and there's also a lot of research backing that up, where growth hormone and IGF-1 combined actually have a double effect as opposed to one or the other. So again, it's going to help you with your joints, your recovery, bone density, fat loss, obviously increasing testosterone and things like that. Next, Katsu, blood flow restriction, increases lactate, which is common sense, guys. Remember, the proof of fast twitch activation is lactic acid, right? Without boring you with too many details, when your fast twitch muscles contract and fatigue, they release lactic acid. So if you're getting a burn, that's the number one indicator that you're recruiting your fast twitch muscles. Because a lot of people are like, well, Megan, how do I know I'm recruiting my fast twitch fibers? Well, are you getting a burn? Are you getting that crazy lactic acid buildup? That's the sign that you're using them, because guess what? Slow twitch muscles release carbon dioxide and water. Fast twitch muscles release lactate when they contract, right? So going for that pump, going for that burn, that's one of the number one indicators that you're recruiting the muscles that are going to have the biggest response to training, right? And of course, lactate has different effects, lowers myostatin, cell swelling, satellite cells, the typical stuff. Also, don't forget, lactic acid increases the conversion of IGF-1 to IGF-1-DES, right? Which is obviously a much more powerful version of IGF-1. Next, increases mTOR. You guys know by now, if you've been watching my videos, mTOR is the king of protein synthesis. You could have DNA transcription all you want. You could have all the testosterone that you want. But if you don't have mTOR to obviously kickstart the ribosome and translation process, you're not going to put on muscle. And obviously, BFR increases mTOR. It increases glycogen capacity, right? So you're able to actually store more carbs within your muscles, gives you a fuller look, right? Also allows you to eat more carbs, obviously. Allows you to train harder, makes you stronger. Pretty much the performance increases. Next, it increases the insulin sensitivity, right? So it mobilizes GLUT4 for you guys who remember the carb backloading videos. Very important for insulin sensitivity. And also the frequent training obviously helps with that, because again, if you're training frequently, that allows you to process carbs better. Next, less cortisol, because you're in the gym a lot less longer, right? So less cortisol means better recovery, better hormonal profile. Remember, guys, cortisol increases myostatin, so you want that fucker down, right? You don't want it to at zero, obviously, but you don't want it to be too elevated. And if you're in the gym for 2 hours nonstop, you're gonna get a cortisol response, and that's obviously gonna interfere with protein synthesis and things like that. Next, it increases cell swelling, and I already made a video about that. The more hydrated the cell is, the bigger the anabolic signals, lower protein breakdown, extremely low risk of injuries. Guys, you're not going to snap your shit up lifting 50% of your 1 rep max, or in some cases even 30 to 40%, right? But you will when you constantly pushing extremely heavy weights, which I'm not against. Remember, HSP training has a lot of heavy lifting into that. That's how you're going to get that bone density. But doing that every single day is eventually going to lead to some injuries. How do you guys think I snapped my shit up? My lower back from rack pulls, and my shoulders, my knees. It was just from doing constant heavy lifting every single day when I really didn't have to do that. So extremely low risk of injury. Longevity is key. I know when we're young, we don't care about the future. That's how I was. But trust me, those injuries are going to nag you for the rest of your life. Partial range of motion. And that study came out a while ago, if you're not familiar with it. But pretty much it showed that they took two groups, and these are trained men, and the group doing partial range of motion it was triceps. It was a skull crushers, I believe, had 70% more gains. And sure enough, they looked at the correlations to find out what was the reason. Even though the volume was equal, the weight was equal, it was mainly because of the pump, the cell swelling, the metabolic stress, the hypoxic environment. So again, you guys remember the bros were right. Everyone used to say, oh, you got to do full range of motion. And I think I made a big rant about that years ago, where I explained that you don't need full range of motion as long as you split it up into different exercises, right? Because it's almost impossible to do full range of motion for any muscle, period, right? Because of strength curves and things like that. So it's better if you split it up in different angles. Same thing with biceps, triceps, legs, you name it, right? So full range of motion is overrated. Now, if you obviously a strength athlete and that's what you're worried about, then absolutely. But for hypertrophy, You don't need full range of motion on every exercise, especially if you're splitting them up and doing multiple exercises. In HSP, you're doing the full range of motion of every muscle anyway, because you're training it in the stretch position, in the contracted position, and obviously in the entire range of motion. And again, Katsu increases VEGF and nitric oxide production, which is going to help you with vascularity. It's going to help you get better pumps in the future, better blood circulation, better recovery. Pretty much all the nutrients that are in your blood are going to be delivered to the target tissues a lot better. So it is a cheat code for volume and frequency, guys. Pump training is a cheat code because you're able to accumulate volume, accumulate frequency, less injuries, less muscle damage, which is why the fastest growth on record is always with Katsu. It's a cheat code, guys. It allows you to bypass all the negative effects of constantly lifting heavy while reaping the very same benefits, and in many cases even more. Why do few people promote it? Simple. Number one is ego, right? Because people hate the fact that for years they were preaching, you gotta get stronger to get bigger. You gotta bring your fucking bench from 200 to fucking 800 to build muscle. And now all the studies are showing that they were clearly wrong, right? Especially the guys who were bashing me years ago, saying, "Oh, Megan doesn't know what he's talking about. High rep training is not gonna work for natties, blah blah blah." They're not gonna talk about BFR because it literally shows that they were wrong, right? So ego is the number one reason why blood flow restriction is not that popular in the fitness community, even though it is so effective and recognized all around the world. That's why I tell you guys, beware of experts, because expert bias is going to stop them from giving you guys the truth, because they value their reputation more than the truth. The second thing is obviously it's not good for business. Gyms hate it, because if you know that you can build muscle without heavy weights, that's less gym memberships. That's just common sense. So how do you apply Katsu? Number one, you could use it on your upper arm, on your upper leg. Don't put it anywhere else. Don't do no dumb shit. Don't put it on your knees. Don't put it on your neck, right? Again, there goes the creator here. He's showing how to apply it. You don't have to use those exact same bands, but you get the idea. Also, keep in mind, it applies to your chest and your back as well, right? Studies have shown that if you're benching with Katsu, even though the bands are on your arms, your chest actually grows more than the control group, right? And it's due to different factors. Not only you have the circulation of the anabolic factors, but you also have a higher recruitment of your chest, since your triceps fatigue a lot faster with Katsu. The tightness, keep it on a 70% scale. So if 10 is the tightest, you want to be around 7. I bump it up to 8. Funny story, me and one of my clients was talking about this. I believe it was this weekend, and it was hilarious. He said, Megan, when you make that video, make sure you let him know, not to overdo it. I was like, hey, it's coming, because it's always going to be that fucker who's going to be like, hey, according to him, no pain, no gain. They're going to put a fucking 20 out of 10 tightness and drop dead, So we definitely don't want that. I was laughing so hard because it's true. Someone's going to say, no pain, no gain. I got to progressively overload the tightness, go to 20 out of 10 and fucking snap this shit up. So follow the rules. 7 out of 10. It's extremely safe. Remember, this has been researched on old, dying motherfuckers. So they're not going to apply something that's going to kill you on old people, right? They're going to get sued out of the ass. So it's extremely safe as long as you follow the rules. Set recommendation, again, same thing as Nucleus, right? 5 sets, 15 or 30 reps. People are always asking me, should I go to failure or not? The answer is always the same, guys. You want to go as close to failure as possible without really killing yourself, right? So leave about 1 or 2 reps in the tank. And again, which is why I'm so surprised that people think that you have to use bitch weights on Nucleus overload. When I say lightweight, I'm always referring to 15 or higher. Heavyweight is anything less than 6 to 8 reps, right? Moderate weight is about 12 to 15. Light weights for me is 15 or 30, 15 or 20, in that ballpark. All right. As far as rest between sets, again, follow a drop set, rest, pause protocol. You want to keep rest period short. Remember, the goal is to get a pump, so just focus on the pump. You could do it up to twice a day, 3 to 6 times a day, pretty much just like Nucleus overload, guys. You can use it for HSP training, for the P part, right? For the pump exercises. You could also use it for the stretch exercises. I don't recommend you use that for the H exercises, because the H part of HSP is mainly strength training, right? Which is, again, I keep showing you, I'm not against strength training. It has its place. You just have to know how to program it right. And obviously, you could use that for Nucleus overload as well. Use that as a way to intensify your workouts. And again, it's going to give you the biggest pumps of your motherfucking life. Guys, I'm not kidding. Anyone who's done it will tell you, the pumps are insane. A lot of you fuckers have no clue how much of a pump their body's able to produce until you do blood flow restriction. It's insane. Your arms feel like they're about to explode. So try that, guys. And again, you don't have to do blood flow restriction or do pump training. It just speeds up the process. You could do drop sets. You could do rest pause. You could do same muscle supersets. It's up to you. So don't feel like you have to wrap shit around your arm, obviously. But now with the coronavirus situation, it doesn't hurt. It's gonna make your workouts a lot shorter. It's gonna intensify them, and you're gonna get all these benefits. And I am not sponsored by any of these motherfuckers, so I've been talking about this shit for the last 8 years. So not sponsored by them. I make no money from this, so just letting you guys know what works. All right, guys, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell, and visit my website to grab yourself a copy of my HSP training program. It's a hypertrophy guide, meal plan, macro guide, nutrition guide. On top of the program, everything you need as far as building muscle is in there, condensed in as few pages as possible. Website is www.team3dalpha.com. Use the 40% off coupon code, which is Nucleus overload.